Gibbous, a Cthulhu adventure, is so much more than an old-school animated point-and-click adventure made by a team of 3 Romanians. It is a love letter to the point-and-click games of the LucasArts era, being infused with those games' voice, atmosphere, and both literal and game mechanic specific references. I covered the Gibbous demo during their Kickstarter campaign a solid 3 years ago, and am more than happy to be finally playing the finished product. So let's get into the writhing mass of tentacles, hairballs, and lost shoes and see what 3 years of development have produced. If this is the first time on my channel, welcome, I'm Steven,
Nonsense.
geek culture analyst, point and click extraordinaire, and please don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy what follows. If you're already a subscriber, welcome back, and remember to click that bell button, it really helps a lot. I need to be very careful when talking about Gibbous, a Cthulhu adventure, because I don't want to spoil the best moments, but I also will be mentioning some of the funnier stuff that you'll encounter in the game, just so you have things to look forward to and pick it up. But let's start with the art direction. The backgrounds are gorgeously illustrated 2D images, featuring all manner of weird and forced perspective, and generally a very stylized look, much in the tune with the game's inspirations. Also, they are all pretty much loaded with all manner of references. Let's take this one for instance, one of the first screens of the game. You have, starting from left to right, Green Fandango, Adventure Time, Lovecraft, Double Day of the Tentacle, and Edgar Allan Poe. These being situated at the beginning of the game should give you a good idea of the type of experience you are embarking upon. These outright references tend to be mainly focused in the beginning part of the game. For most of the playtime, while they're still there is less of them and they are more subtle. In fact, in Gibbous, a Cthulhu adventure, is where you'll find one of the most innocent and funny Game of Thrones references you'll ever find in any sort of medium, period. Does it also have a bunch of in-jokes that only Romanians will understand? Yes it does, and I wouldn't have it any other way. If I'll ever get to make, design, or at least write my own game, you can bet your ass I'll put in jokes that only Romanians will understand. Do these take away from the overall writing, story, or characters? Absolutely not. These in-jokes are on top of the game's core, so you're not losing anything of the game's charm if you don't get the not so subtle snipes at the poor state of Romania's roads, the unclear messaging of the tourism industry, or the brain drain that's been only accelerating in the past few years. In general, the writing is lighthearted and funny, and it stays on point. Maybe a bit rough around the edges, maybe a bit more verbose than it has to be, but it is a first outing for the devs and an indie effort to boot, so they deserve some slack. That being said, the sheer amount of voiced lines is overwhelming, but in a positive way. Each hotspot in the game has in general 3 different lines when examined, and each of them has the potential of being a not so hidden reference to something else.
The skull stuck to a piece of driftwood. Must have been a sailor. Or a...
Added to this, at a certain point in the game, Don, the detective, gains an ability which allows him to further inspect each item, and most of them give off a completely different and new line.
This is all your fault, Bernard.
My scythe. I like to keep it next to where my heart used to be.
So what about the puzzles? Throughout the game you will play as Buzz, the librarian, Don, and a bit as Kitty, the cat. When you do get to play as Kitty, you'll notice that her eyes will follow the cursor. It's such a wonderfully nice and both an in-world and meta-jokey touch that I simply had to mention it here. The other 2 each have their own special abilities. Buzz can sometimes ask Kitty to do some things for him, and in true cat fashion she'll only move her furry ass when she wants, and Don gets the ability of further investigating items. It works perfectly with the fact that he is a detective after all. Thankfully, in case you get a bit stuck when you're playing as Don, you have a nice notepad where he'll write down where he is in the story and what he's supposed to do. Those notes, combined with the various hints in the dialogue and descriptions of things, should be more than enough to make any stumble a very temporary one. There was only one puzzle which I had to look up, and it was one of those cipher alphabet puzzles. I have to say that once I saw the solution, I would have never found it on my own because I really wasn't anywhere in that mind frame. But otherwise, the puzzles are very straightforward, and despite the title of the game, there is no moon logic here, folks. Progression through Gibbous is generally a super pleasant and fluid experience, which I believe allows for you to take in the story that much better. I imagine it could have been much more difficult, and I also imagine there are some scrapped versions of puzzles that were more head scratchy. But I am glad they chose the more straightforward approach, because I honestly don't have the type of time I had when I was playing adventure games initially. 20 years ago, yeah, sure, I could spend 3 days being stuck on one Grim Fandango puzzle. And I did. Nowadays, not so much. And even so, the game still took me around 20 hours to complete, because I really loved all of the item descriptions and references. So it's a decent time investment for the target demographic anyway, especially if you plan to take it slowly and not speedrun it, which would be kinda counter to the whole idea of adventure games, at least in my opinion. The story does things a little bit differently though. It starts off in one gear or tone, let's say, and by the end it ramps up the wacky, adds in the weird, and dare I say the dramatic as well. The ending has proven to be quite divisive in the player base, but all I'm saying is that if you spend a little time doing some extra research, the game literally spells out the ending at around the midpoint of the story. I believe this goes hand in hand with the occasional fourth wall breaking joke and the reality twisting nature of Lovecraft's writings. Rather meta though, if you think about it. The game telling you how it ends before showing it, kinda like that Ormstein character. So going forward with this meta point of view, those of you who remember my video about the Gibbous Kickstarter demo might remember that Buzz was wearing a burgundy shirt, which I emulated in the video because I had an identically colored one, and why not, I love cosplay. But in the finished game, Buzz is wearing a red t-shirt. And you know who else is known to wear red t-shirts? This guy right here. Oh yeah. So I'm not saying I inspired this change of costume, I'm just saying I might have. That piece of egomaniacal conspiracy theory aside, I simply have to mention the soundtrack, especially once you hit Transylvania, because you will be visiting a small Transylvanian village during your playtime. The game starts off by having a low-key and mysterious sort of vibe to the music. The story is taking place in America, there is this noir-inspired trenchcoat wearing private detective with a gruff voice, but just as things start escalating, as things become global, so does the soundtrack. Saying that the music here is both thematic and atmospheric just doesn't do it justice. The sad wail of the violin infusing the soundtrack with an authenticity that could only truly come from the Tsuika imbued lands of Transylvania. Tsuika! This is also the place in the game where quite possibly the coolest puzzle and reference exists. So it's been made clear by myself, the developers, and the game itself that the old LucasArts adventure games are the bedrock that Gibbous was spawned from. Well, in the Transylvania chapter is where the Stuck in Attic team go beyond simple homage and make an iconic point-and-click adventure mechanic their own. And I am sorry I have to spoil this one, but it is so momentous, in my opinion, that I cannot not talk about it. So if you want to be spoiler free, skip forward a few seconds, I'll post it on the screen where I continue. So what they do is, they take the idea of the insult sword fighting from the Monkey Island series and translate it into something wholly modern and culturally relevant. A rap battle. That's right. Gibbous, a Cthulhu adventure, is the first video game, to my knowledge, that has a rap battle as a gameplay mechanic in it. And it is fire. In conclusion, Gibbous, a Cthulhu adventure, is so much more than the sum of its parts. And when its parts are as great as we have here, you know you have something truly special. It's definitely a game best enjoyed by those of us who are around 30 and who have had their teenage years populated with the amazement, amusement, and frustration of LucasArts adventure games. But it is also just as playable as someone's first point-and-click title. If anything, all the references might make a first-time player interested in all the sources of the references. In which case, I invite you to check out my review of Grim Fandango Remastered up in the corner. Gibbous, a Cthulhu adventure, gets my nonsense seal of approval, no doubt, no caveats, no nothing. So how does Gibbous, a Cthulhu adventure, look to you? Are you an avid old-school point-and-click adventure player or someone who has never interacted with the genre? Let me know in the comments. I've been Steven Nonsense, thank you very much for watching and see you next time. Cthulhu willing.